Hello, everyone. Welcome to What's Next. I'm your host, Matthew Quinn. And today we are getting our Fringe on. I'm very excited. Our two guests come, one from the World Fringe and one from the Edinburgh Fringe. And so between the two of them, they're kind of representing almost every Fringe festival out there. And I'm very excited to bring them both on and kind of talk about the Fringe pivot and looking ahead in terms of Fringe festivals. So I'd like to start to bring into the studio Holly Lombardo. Holly, hello there. Yay. Yes, the Zoom hand wave. Holly has worked in creative industries at a senior level since 2001. She founded the Brighton Fringe in 2004, managing it to become the third largest arts fringe festival in the world. She was a senior manager at the Edinburgh Fringe Society and director of an Edinburgh Fringe venue. Known for working with some of the UK's largest international festivals. In 2007, she pulled her knowledge of the cultural sector to found the World Fringe Network, which links nearly 300 fringe festivals across the globe. As well as this, she lectured at universities on event and business management, was an assessor for the Arts Council England, and where she assessed the NIF and has been an executive trustee of the British Arts Festival Association for 8 years. More recently, she was the project director for Wood & O Theatres and left her position as the artistic director of Fusion Arts Oxford to join the National World Touring Forum UK. Welcome in, Holly.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Great. All right, and you're in just outside of Reading, correct? All the way from
Reading, yes.
Across the pond, and wonderful to have you, Holly. Let's get your co-guest in here, Amy Saunders. Hello, Amy.
Hi, Matthew.
Amy has worked in the arts for the last 25 years, supporting and advocating for artists and creatives from all corners of the world. Currently, Amy is the head of participant services at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. Edinburgh Festival Fringe. She has spent 13 years working alongside Edinburgh's major festivals. As well as her current role, she also works with the Festivals Edinburgh, where she was the International Projects Manager, developing and delivering projects and partnerships across the world, and also through her role as Senior International Advisor for Creative New Zealand, New Zealand's national arts funding agency. It is through building valuable and honest relationships, challenging the status quo, and maintaining will to make positive change that sustains Amy. Very nicely said. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you, Matthew. Nice to be here.
Oh, wonderful. All right, so let's get Holly back in. All right, let's do the magic screen dance. Yeah, you like that? The magic of Zoom. All right, and Amy, you're coming in actually from Edinburgh, right? You're actually over there?
I'm in Portobello in Edinburgh by the beach. I seem to be quite dark on screen. I'm sorry about that. It is a dim day in Edinburgh.
The rains of Edinburgh. Okay. So I tend to start the show asking each of our guests to kind of give us their pivot moment. So January, we woke up, it was going to be the best year ever. We had all of our plans. And suddenly in mid-March, we were told to stay in place and everything changed. So starting with Holly, can you kind of go through what your kind of pivot moment was when this all happened?
Sure, yes. And doesn't it feel like a lifetime ago, January? It feels like a whole other world.
I know, right?
Yeah, it's really weird when you think back to pre-COVID. It feels like this is all we've known. So what happened before was the World Fringe Congress in Adelaide. So that was in February, mid-February. And we had Fringe directors and producers from all over the world come to the Adelaide Fringe. And we had heard of COVID at that time, and we knew that it was in China and that it was a problem, but we hadn't stopped flying, and except unfortunately the Chinese contingents that were coming from the Chinese Fringe festivals couldn't come to Adelaide, and so we still had festival directors from all over the world there. And then when we left, it really felt like the Fringe Festival was kind of galloping to try and get done before this. It was kind of dawning on everyone that this, something big is going to happen, and it's going to be awful and scary and horrid, and you could feel the kind of let's just try and get this festival done kind of feeling. And then as soon as we got home, just after that, everything went into lockdown, obviously just a couple of weeks or less than 2 weeks after we returned from Australia. So it's quite fun. And then after that, obviously, festivals started stopping, postponing, cancelling, one after another. It was just it was a pack of dominoes falling. And it was tragic and painful and horrid for all of these festival producers, particularly the ones that were coming up. I think some of them had a couple of days to decide to cancel, and that was it. So it was just watching that happen was really hard. And it wasn't as hard for me because I wasn't running a festival, but it was really hard to watch. And then there was things were happening out of that, but that was it was just quite interesting because we'd all been together, and we felt even more grateful that we'd had that time and that we were able to get the Congress done and be inspired and reconnected before we were unconnected completely.
Yeah, and that's a good point, and it's something we're going to talk about more about the groups coming together. And I knew, but I didn't really see that meeting in the beginning of the year actually kind of set some good tone for what you had to go through together, right?
Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah, it really did. I'm so grateful that we had that time together in Adelaide. And
yeah, it was a big one. It was oh
it
yeah,
was the Congress was amazing. They always are. They're so warm and fuzzy, and at the end, even the most robust of us are in tears and crying because we've had such an experience together. So yeah, it was good.
Oh, that's good. I'm glad to see the happy side of that. So wonderful. Thank you for that, Holly. And Amy, how about you? How was your pivot?
Our pivot, yeah, I mean, it's interesting listening to Holly retell those months, because I think it's like that. You always remember where you were when Princess Diana died. Like we're all going to remember where we were when. And actually, I was in Melbourne, and it was becoming, as Holly said, apparent that am I going to be able to get back to Edinburgh? It was becoming apparent it was becoming serious. So I did get back, and actually our CEO was supposed to be meeting me in Melbourne and the board. She didn't come in the end. So she stayed, and I got back. And we basically went into crisis management. So we had to go through quite a long process of consultation around whether we should cancel or not. Our festival is in August. This was in March. We've got 6 other major summer festivals that we work with: the Book Festival, the Tattoo and International Festival, the Art Festival. So everybody was in this process of trying to know, will we be okay by August? And a lot of people thought, it'll be on by August, we'll be fine, let's not cancel. And lots of the venues that we work with and the artists that we work with were beginning to say what's happening, and it became apparent to us that we needed to take a leadership role, and artists are beginning to commit money and to coming. We needed to make a decision, basically. So the summer festivals all got together and said we're not going to go ahead as planned, because it looks very unlikely that we'll be able to. And then we went into real crisis mode. We decided our priority was to refund all the registration fees that we had received from artists. So in order to do that, we had to get a loan. We didn't have the money to survive to do that. So we went into quick negotiation with the Scottish Government, who gave us a £1 million loan, which enabled us to pay back those registration fees and to survive another year, basically. And in many ways, I don't feel like we've been in crisis mode, but when I look back, I guess we've been managing the crisis at the time. But we managed to deliver a number of services throughout August when we would normally have a festival. And again, we kind of went, the priority right now is to try to support artists and venues. And we set up a number of fundraisers for artists and venues, so crowdfunding platform, and that's still going. We delivered a number of online digital industry platforms, so a marketplace for companies that were already made and tour ready, that the venues put forward to go into a Fringe marketplace environment. The industry could still accredit with us, still, they would be programming. And as every week went by, it kind of became more and more apparent that there probably wouldn't be much touring coming up in 2020 and 2021. So the whole way through, we basically just renegotiated our reality and did as much as we possibly could to support artists and venues and our own, team. And that was our last 6 months. 5 years.
I know. It's crazy. I mean, I think we're actually at 7 months now from March.
Yeah.
Is that? I mean, and you hit on something that both of you kind of hit on this. I remember in the early stages, because I'm a heavy venue and booker producer at the Hollywood Fringe, and that was happening in June. And it was I remember having clients and also thinking, oh, this will be over by June. Don't worry. And there was this game we were all playing in the early months because there wasn't a lot of information. And we were all looking at the festivals like, all right, what are they doing? And that calendar of festivals became kind of like, what should we do based off everyone else? And I think, Holly, you can kind of talk a bit to that, because with the scope of fringes that you represent, there were several at the very beginning, like you said, that had to make that quick choice. Yeah. And then what did you as the World Fringe organization kind of do to kind of bring them together and like share this information? Because I imagine, like myself, I was like, what's going on?
Yeah, so we conducted, we started doing crisis Zoom meetings with Fringe festivals, and we were doing 2 in one day, one at kind of 8:00 in the morning with the kind of Australasian contingent, and then one in the afternoon at 5 o'clock with the North Americans, and then there's a car started outside, and then anyone in the middle could join either one, and we must have had about over 50 hours of those in between sort of end of March to end of July. So we had a lot, and they were invaluable because this was new for everyone, and it is new. Every day continues to be new, but at that time things were changing and crashing down so fast that we had to have a lot of meetings, because every time we spoke, something different was happening. There were new government policies and laws and new worries. And it was interesting to see, because sometimes those meetings were really down, and then that is understandable, and the kind of feeling in the Zoom room was bleak, and then the next week we'd come back, something would have happened, and everyone was a bit more upbeat and happy, and they were excited about the future and their plans, because creatives want to create. And Fringe directors are so creative and innovative, and they're leaders in so many ways, that they're the ones who are going, right, if we can't meet physically, we're going to do it online. And so we had one of the first online Fringe festivals was Richmond Fringe in the US, and Carmel, who runs that, bless her, ended up being the kind of guru of all digital online Fringe festivals from then on. And they kind of, they went from really grassroots in their sitting rooms, and she was sort of telling people where to put cushions and lighting and things like that, to the kind of more slick in a way, more kind of understanding how to do the studios, at home studios and things like that. So she really she spent hours and hours doing this is how I did it sort of talks with people. But yeah, I think we did over 50 hours of meetings with Fringe festival directors, and they're such generous all you fringers are such generous people that there was a lot of love for each other. There was a lot of support and a lot of sharing of ideas and resources and things like that. So yeah, we continue to pull everyone together, really.
And so important, I think, not only for the emotional connectivity. I'm not alone. There's other people here, but sharing of the information was just so valuable. I mean, it started with getting loans, like Amy was saying, like, how do we get a loan? How do we get, there was a lot of fiscal money floating around for artists. How do we fill out those forms? And then once that was done, it was like, okay, well, how do I do the streaming thing? And everybody, and I do agree, fringers in particular, I think artists in general are very giving, but that fringe spirit of let's help each other out and build this, I think was really apparent during this. And Amy, as you mentioned, the concern for the artists and venues, and the marketplace, I thought was a wonderful idea. I went through that a bit during the Fringe. But what other types of things were there? Meetings like Holly was saying, or what did you guys kind of do to build that community?
We normally have a Fringe Central program, so it's an artist development program for artists at the Fringe that we put online. And as Holly said, it's, I think we are lucky that our industry is so adaptive, because it also made the most of the government job scheme that we had here. So all of our team, 70% of our organisation went onto what we call furlough, and they didn't come back until the beginning of July. So they had 4 weeks basically to then suddenly develop all these online platforms for artists and industry. And all of them were new platforms. So we suddenly created 6 new platforms that no one had ever knew anything about. So we did, an online Fringe Central, and there were, 25 online events around mentoring. And Katie, who runs that program, came back and sent out a survey to artists saying, what is it that you are interested in learning? And interestingly, she does that every year, and the subjects this year were quite different to normal. And there's a lot of mental health. Interest. There was no interest in mental health, interestingly, this year. People wanted to know digital, how do they turn their work from live to digital? How do they monetize digital work? So, she created a whole lot of events around those sorts of subjects. We did a Fringe exchange program for industry. Again, what Holly was saying, I think there was an enormous hunger from industry to know what other people were doing. So what were venues doing with 300-seat venues that weren't being used? Were some of and venues saying, actually, we're now a food delivery outlet of people in need, and so sharing new models of business. And there was a really, that was, I think, one of the great things that did come out of it was the industry connections that developed, and suddenly everybody was on a level playing field, and everybody was in complete disarray, basically. And just wanting to learn, and with sponges to go, okay, nothing that we used to do works anymore. So what are we going to do going forward? And we did that. We, things that we hadn't thought about. So once it became apparent that artists were wanting to do online activity, our existing web infrastructure, like ticket selling infrastructure, just worked. So we had to create a whole new, in literally 10 days, a whole new online listings system, because suddenly there were 300 artists that were all wanting to do online activity in August. So people had to learn very quickly, and we all had to change our expectations as well about the delivery. So, and people were really, really responsive, I think, and appreciative of the efforts that anyone who did anything went to try and create platforms for conversation or artistic expression, actually, at that point in time.
Yeah, it's a great comment. And Holly, too, because I know you're in contact with these, what have been, like, since a lot of these festivals have already occurred, I mean, there was several during the year, and then Edinburgh happened. What what's your takeaway from the audiences and all that? Was there like a severe disappointment, or were people like pleasantly surprised, like this is cool and I'm digging this online thing? Like what was your sense of the reaction to all of this online stuff?
Well, I think that there was a massive flood of digital content, and that was very difficult to navigate when they're floating around on their own from artists. So festivals pulling that together and being in their communities that they're normally in and speaking to their local audiences and having that feeling that they're all part of something that's a little bit bigger and that builds momentum and things like that was really important for the artists, because they got more hits and there was more of that, but there is a buzz around it even when it's a digital festival that you know, like Edinburgh and all of them, they gained momentum. And so I think one thing that I thought was quite interesting was not everyone wanted to watch it when it was on live, but it was quite nice to have the choice when you knew what was happening live, but then you could have the choice to watch it later if you wanted. And the feedback from that is that there were tickets sold. People, it wasn't just the free stuff that was being watched, that there were tickets sold. And also the views and things like that built up. Probably, in fact, some had more people watching their work than they would in a live one. So that was a positive, and that, you know, that was relayed back from one Fringe festival that actually their sponsors were really happy because actually they were meeting more people now. Instead of the walk up was this much and the digital was this much, so the sponsors were really happy to continue with funding that festival in particular, and others as well. So there were some winning moments, and there are other examples I can give you.
Definitely we go into that, but I do, just to comment on the, you know, theater, especially here in LA, is very tough. Audiences, even for a 50-seat house, can be tough. And I know from the online streaming people here, they're saying the exact same thing. Like, I had more people see my work this time than if I was doing a live show. And in some cases, they felt they made more money. That they actually had, you know, because they didn't have to rent a theater. They didn't have to pay all these tech people. And so basically the money they collected was the money they made. So yeah, and definitely we'll talk more about the silver lining with all of this. But with Amy, and what's that?
I'm just like,
right. It's because it's 5 o'clock. It's that was my favorite thing in Edinburgh, getting a shot of gin. Well, not that big of a shot, but a shot of gin and my
gonna do it on screen.
I've got gin envy now.
Do I look like
I know, right?
Yeah.
Well, pass Amy a drink. Give Amy a drink. Come on.
Yeah, delicious. Thank you.
Sorry for interrupting the gin moment.
No, I always welcome to interrupt for gin.
I think, though, that ironically, that's exactly what I was about to say, is that what people missed, I think, was the social interaction of being able to go to have a drink together after a show. So you don't have, you know, I think there was a bit of online fatigue, obviously, because people were working all day on computers and then consuming entertainment on computers. And also the beauty of a festival is that notion that you go to a show together and you go and have a drink afterwards and talk about it. And actually, I guess that whole element, the social element of what festivals present with you, got taken away from us. And obviously different art forms find it easier to work in the digital realm than other art forms. That was obviously a challenge. But I also know some artists who did incredibly well actually during that period. You know, music lent itself, I think, very well to that online platform. But I feel that it's, you know, as I'm sure you've had this conversation, we've all had this conversation, it's kind of a bridge. It's a bridge until we get back to more live. I don't think anybody ever wants to see the live go.
No.
But yeah.
No.
We did a lot of experimenting. Around what could work digitally, and I think there's still a big question around monetizing digital for mass consumption and for everybody. And as Holly said, it's quite hard to find an audience unless you're tagged underneath a festival umbrella or a venue umbrella, or
Yeah.
otherwise
Yeah.
lost. Someone told me a statistic, the BBC here, which is the state broadcaster, something like 90% of their online content is never watched by anybody. Yeah. Just sits
Wait,
there.
19 or 90? 90 or 19?
90.
What?
Because there's just so much online content.
So
and if you're not forcing it out there and promoting it and advertising it and have decent marketing budgets, it just gets lost. Yeah.
Gosh.
And there's also, add on to that, there's a lot of not so good stuff out there. And so people, I think, they needed to be guided. They need to be kind of shown, this is good, a comparison of kind of what's out there. And festivals can help with that. Festivals kind of bring things together. They give you a PR thing like you're talking about, Amy, but they're also almost like kind of a legitimacy of the piece. And so, I I just see a comment up here. Speaking of all this and drinking, and after the drink, we got a little shout out. You both know him. Everyone loves him. A little shout out from Peter Michael Marino. Miss hanging with the gorgeous ladies at Fringe Central.
Miss you. Well, there's one artist who's done very well in lockdown. He was you've been an absolute inspiration to artists all over the world, definitely. He's been amazing and very proactive. I don't know where he gets his energy from.
Right? I mean, he did over 40 shows in his apartment in New York City. And another great example is you guys are both talking about of sharing information. Very free to discuss and about that. So let's keeping on the upswing. What are some of the other, with Amy, with the participants and the connecting, and Holly, I think, mentioned a little bit about this. Did you find in this digital world that we're in that artists were able to make connections with either press or other like producers? And was there in some way an easier online connection that people had to kind of build contacts? Because that's a big thing with Fringe, the Edinburgh Fringe.
Some artists definitely, I think, had mentioned to me that they were finding it easier to get industry attention because everybody was at home. They weren't as busy running around, and they were able to set up, and suddenly Zoom became normal. So they could set up Zooms with presenters to pitch their shows, basically. I think that was earlier on. I think as time went on, it became, people became busier in their own lives trying to figure out the future of what was happening. But I think what became more apparent was the quality of conversations happening, I thought, became stronger and stronger. And certainly there was, with the whole Black Lives Matters happening at the same time, I felt like the industry artists, we came together a lot more to discuss. We got over the pandemic a little bit and actually started looking at issues that were affecting the work that was being made and industry in a broader sense. So people became less self-focused and more outward looking at there are some systemic changes here that we need to make. And I felt that was a really positive thing that happened at the right time in a way, and brought people together again. And certainly for us as an organisation is something that we've really taken on board. The whole sort of diverse, inclusive agenda is going to be a big part of the way that we move forward. And in a normal year, if there wasn't a pandemic, I don't know if the action and the conversations would have had the same gravitas that they did this year.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was real positive that came out of it.
Definitely.
That's a great point. And again, kind of like a terrible thing. I mean, the murder of George Floyd was terrible. But just like the pandemic killing millions now is terrible. But as humans, we kind of need to, like, we can't just live in that misery, and we need to kind of see the positive and grow. And I got to tell you, I mean, I know I live in my California-centric life. It was really moving to see the marches going on in London and around the world. I didn't really realize how that had touched so many people. I mean, there were protests. We had like a 20,000 person protest in LA, and it was very evident here that people were talking about it. But it was great to see, and it's cool to hear that that was part of the conversation and effect of what you were doing in Edinburgh. Holly, how about you? Did that come up during your meetings? Was there kind of a world awareness you saw with the Fringes?
Yes, of course. Yeah, massive effect. And Amy's right, is that we have the time to reflect and look back at ourselves during this time, and look back at the world, and what is, from our life before COVID was so stressful and full on and fast paced. I don't know if everyone feels like that, but you just think you're running from one meeting to another. Every weekend you have something planned. There's nothing in my diaries at the weekends now, which is just, that's the first time in my life that's happened. So it's that time to reflect, and of course it came up. It has to, and I think everyone has realised that it's not enough just not to be racist. There's more. You have to do more, and you can't just be like, well, I'm not racist, so everything is fine. That isn't the case, and I think that is a huge global awakening that and everyone can do better, and that is what's come out of that.
Yeah, I don't know if it's too early. I know people are taking things in, they're still processing, but have you heard of any specific steps that any theater companies or organizations are doing kind of address that? Or is it because, like you said, it's more, there was a list that went out about theater companies that didn't support Black Lives Matter, and then they had a follow-up of like, all right, you said this, now what are you going to do about it?
That was that's a good list. It reminds us.
It's a very good list.
Around. And so lots of, in my other company, the Rural Touring Network, is we ran 72, we funded 72 places on unconscious bias training for our sector and our network. So, that is one action that we've taken, and it's the first of many. And it's that kind of, let's look at our policies. Let's look at our employment policy and our redundancy policies, and let's have a look at all of those things. And where do we advertise for jobs, actually? Because if you just put it in this place, then who is reading those job adverts? So it goes from the very basic, and what are your memorandums of articles of association, and your governance, and who sits on your boards. And that, for me, is the place that we're starting. Not with World Fringe. Well, we are with World Fringe, but it doesn't have a board, World Fringe. But in my other job, where we do have board of directors, that's where we're looking. So it starts from the basics that run everything else. So that's what we're, and publicly saying things. That's really important.
Yeah, it is very important.
We're very much the same. We've done a new recruitment board, and I think you'd be hard to find, certainly a Scottish, but probably a UK organisation who isn't right now reassessing their governance structure and reassessing all the things that I talked about. It's really, I hope in 5 years' time you'll look back at the UK, certainly the arts sector, and it will be different to where it is today. So it's a huge impact, a positive impact, and it will take time, but I think it's been taken very seriously, and lots of organisations are making structural changes. So, thankfully.
Well, this is all good to hear, and definitely I would put that under, again, one of the silver linings of all this. So let's cut to now. What is the status of each of your countries, respectfully, in terms of where you are? So right now, what can people go get a pub? They go to a pub? Can they get their fish and chips? I'm sorry, I'm an American. I'm gonna just like stereotype you all. is Edinburgh and England, or Scotland and England, are they connected? Do you guys follow the same rules?
Very
like in
controversial.
terms of
Yeah.
I am such
Yes,
is it that's about it.
Yeah,
That's what we want on this show.
No,
It's a very good question.
the devolved nations are making up their own rules. So England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland there are kind of rules coming out of Westminster for the England, and then there's adaptations of those in the devolved nations as well. So it's very confusing.
It sounds like America.
Yeah. And until 2 hours ago, you could go and get a pint at a pub in Edinburgh. But 2 hours ago, new restrictions came in. The infection rate is on the rise across the UK at startlingly high rates. So Scotland and just announced literally 2 hours ago a whole lot of new, what they're calling a circuit breaker. So 2 weeks, all pubs and bars to shut, not open at all, no alcohol to be served, no travel outside the central belt areas. So they're doing it during the school holidays to try and take a big hit and see if they can pull back the infection rate. So we'll see. And England and Ireland and Wales tend to have been following what Scotland's doing. So I'm assuming it will probably roll out across the country.
Yeah, that's true. We can still go to the pub, and we've got the rule of 6 here. So 6 different people from different houses, or 3 people from 2 different houses, and all the maths that you could do within that can meet still at the moment. But whether that will stop in the next few weeks, I don't know. But I live in a small village, and I feel very blessed to be living in a village, because I see a lot of people walking past. It's a village walkers go through, so I have seen a lot of people, every day, and I'm not in a flat, and I feel very grateful for that. And I've got a brilliant local pub, and it feels very safe actually to go and sit in their garden and have a drink. So in a city, I don't think I'd feel safe necessarily in a large pub or restaurant. But in a village, you know most people who are there. Generally, because we're all really nosy neighbours, we know whose health and if anyone's had COVID or anything like that. So, and we can all support each other. So it's and I've got this tiny little shed that I work in, and so now I could still come to the office. So that's a good thing.
Yeah. Did in either of your countries, was there anyone exploring, like, and I'm looking at, we're going to get out of this someday, and there's going to be steps to this. Are people doing like physically distanced theater? Were there any theaters or any sort of openings either inside or outside for productions?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's happening now. I mean, there has been a lockdown, and theatres in the UK haven't really opened yet, and in Scotland they won't open until next year. But Pleasance, who's one of the main Edinburgh Fringe venues, and they've got a venue in London, just as an example. Next month they're reopening, hopefully, and they've completely reconfigured their theatre spaces into like speakeasy cabaret style, based on that, the intimate tables, socially distanced. So yeah, I think Holly might know more from around.
Yeah.
The
world. Yeah. What are you hearing from your sources around the world?
So everyone was always very jealous of New Zealand. They were kind of pioneering the way in safety. And where we were in severe lockdown, there was a kind of 20,000 person football match happening and things like that. So one of the interesting things, as a side thing, is that with these global conversations we were having, it's just that the differences in the government responses to the arts and COVID was staggering. And some countries you felt really pleased for, and some you just felt devastated for, actually, and still do. I'm not going to say them now because would be unfair, but some of them, for the artists and for the festival's future, devastated because it doesn't look rosy. But then there's places that give you hope and inspiration, like in New Zealand, where things are back on, and places like Darwin, North Australia, where events are happening socially distanced, and everyone was just like, because now people are doing that combination of live and digital, and when you're watching a live event digitally, you just like, there's people together watching something live. My heart is being filled again, and you're just so chuffed for them. That in itself is really nice. But I know that there's been lots of small kind of hybrid fringes happening. There's a really amazing example just recently of, and this is a massive silver lining, is that kind of cross-participatory work that's happening. So, and festivals are sharing work and shows, and artists can tour the whole world from their house, which has never been able to happen before. And so Sydney Fringe and the Stockholm Fringe recently shared digital productions, and they cross-promoted as well, and they did talks together and things like that. And I just thought that we're just going to see that happening now, because we've all been propelled kind of 10 years. We've been jumped in 7 months, 10 years ahead in kind of digital understanding and technology, and the way that we are now receiving art has changed completely in 7 months. And we might not have got there in kind of like 5 to 10 years. So I feel like that is something that we can all reflect and keep. That's our learning that we get to keep from this, and we can use going forward.
Yeah, I agree, and echoing that with this technology and how we have advanced. None of this. I mean, some of it we were all kind of looking at streaming shows. It made sense, but not to this level. And what's amazing to me is all this technology. Zoom. It has been around for years. Like there was nothing stopping us from doing any of this. No. And I know with Holly, with both your organizations, you guys, just the nature of what you do is an international affair. Yeah. Like Edinburgh is an international. World Fringe covers all these. And all these relationships were there in a certain like handshake and a bar, drink and something. But now it's grown to this online Zoom connection. And let's talk a little bit about this for both of you in terms of what's next with all of this and moving forward. We just like people are saying, streaming isn't going to replace live theater. I think there's also a sentiment that we're not going to, when this is over, we're still going to look at streaming. We're still going to have some online representation for shows. And like you said, between these two festivals, that's amazing stuff. How and I know it's early and it's a bad question to say, what are your plans for next year? Because it can get you into trouble. But what would you say based off what you've learned from this? Do you see points, the silver linings that you're going to extend to once you do open up?
Well, I don't know about us. We don't run a festival, so Amy can answer.
Amy, what's your? Well, yeah, and I'll get you later, Holly. I got some question for you, but Amy, what? And I know Shona, the president of the Edinburgh Fringe Society, came out with a letter or an article saying, I thought it was very brave, just being very realistic, that next year the festival may be half the size. So, I mean, I think it was like 4,000 shows last year. Half the size live venues and more streaming. So the streaming would be up.
Yeah, I think streaming, I think the two words of the era, pivoting and hybrid. So we will be a hybrid festival. And that's there to stay, I think. And I think with the whole climate change agenda as well, it makes so much sense that, and I'm actually doing some work with the Federation of Scottish Theatre and Dance here around, what does international mean anymore, and why do we want to travel and exchange, and we do. So let's just explore a bit more about what does that mean and how can we use digital to support the live. So yes, certainly, I think we're looking at, hopefully a festival next year. And ironically, when it all kicked off, one of the criticisms of the Fringe in Edinburgh is how much it's grown. And in a way, it was like COVID's done us an enormous service, because it's not going to be that giant festival next year. It just can't be the same size.
Yeah.
But obviously, we hope that all the venues will survive and make it through to next year. And we've set up a venue and artist recovery fund that the venues and artists can apply to try and help them come back in 2021. Many of the artists that were registered this year have deferred their payment, so their shows, they're already registered for next year. We won't know, obviously, until the world, we're not in control of the pandemic, but yeah, hopefully by next August. We'll have to make decisions before then, but certainly, as Holly says, fingers crossed. But no matter what, there will be digital activity, and lots of the digital platforms that we've established this year will be with us ongoing now. So,
I think, I see that as well. And unfortunately, what you were just saying also reminded me from earlier this conversation. Unfortunately, we may have that time again where we're all looking at the different countries to go, are we going to open the festival this year? Like we're kind of stuck, because like you said, we have no control over this. And it's great to see. And like Holly was saying too, during the world meetings, those glimmers of hope. Like, I love New Zealand. I mean, besides The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, like now I've got like a whole, like, wow, they really got it together. And that is helpful for us in America who, venue owners, all that, who are worried about how they're going to open. Yeah. I do have to bring up this one comment, because it is a shout out to the Fringe. Monica Bauer and a Peter Michael Marino. I swear, he gets mentioned every single episode of the show. I just want to point that out.
Prolific.
Peter got Monica into the first Ed Fringe in 2011, a great gift to American artists. I'd like to thank everyone involved in keeping Ed Fringe going, and also a little plug for me too. Oh, I like that. That's very sweet. Well, Fringes they are important for the artist, for the audiences. And as we're kind of finding in this pandemic, they're very important for our support, for our connections. Holly, in terms of you've got this great scope of all these Fringes. What's the tone? I know the tone has been up and down, but are people kind of embracing this digital streaming? And do you see more relations forming between groups that will lead us into next year?
God, yeah, definitely. There's so much more connectivity in kind of the planning stages, I guess, of festivals now, and that kind of want to tour digitally and work together and share. It's actually quite exciting, I think, about what is going to happen. I mean, we're going to see. With festivals, what's great is that some festivals are kind of trying things out as well at the moment, and they're practicing on what it could look like. And Brighton Fringe, which is happening now, is doing a kind of hybrid, and they've got this incredible outdoor stage on the seafront, which you couldn't get more kind of sea air going around those tables. So it can be done, and there are some really great examples which are being shared around with everyone at the moment. But we are going to see like recessions and things like that happening. Fringe festivals are very adaptive, as we've been talking about. So in the face of recession and things like that, we might see more Fringe festivals pop up, because that is the model that is more sustainable in many ways. There's a lot of shared risk in Fringe festivals. It's not one massive pot of money that's coming from the government or wherever. It's a shared responsibility and a shared risk between the venues, the Fringe producers and the artists, and the community that they're sitting. So those are kind of that is why Fringe is so resilient, and why we are now seeing kind of 300 Fringe festivals in the world, where when there was more money sloshing around, there was a lot less. And I think that really does prove that they are, pioneering forward, and they're the ones that are going to keep culture in our backyards.
I agree. And we artists again are resilient folk, and fringe artists even more so. And in regards to that, the artist and support of the artist, Amy, you had mentioned again the support Edinburgh given, and the marketplace was kind of the big concept of that. And can you talk a little bit about that, and is that something that is continuing throughout? Are you going to keep that kind of open, or how the evolution of the marketplace?
Yeah, sure. So again, as I said before, as the fringe has grown, one of the challenges the industry have found is the challenge of finding the right work for their audiences. So for the last few years, there's been kind of a growing conversation around how can the fringe society help the programmers navigate their way more efficiently through the 4,000 shows. And recognizing that not everybody is at the Edinburgh Fringe for onward touring opportunities. There's a lot of amateur work that doesn't want to travel. There's all sorts of scales of work. But for the companies that are there, professional companies who are looking at touring opportunities, whether it's rural touring, local touring, national or international touring, we've been interested in how can we create an online platform, I guess, to help programmers navigate and find the right work. Because if you're flying in for 3 or 4 days from somewhere, I love it. You walk around Edinburgh and you see people with these Excel spreadsheets, color coded, and they're there to do business, and they all leave one or two for the odd show that word of mouth will take them to, but they're really there to have 3 or 4 shows, and that's their annual programming. So they want to be going to the right shows. So marketplace was a way to try and work with the venues. The Fringe Society doesn't curate or program. One of the greatest strengths of the Fringe is the curation of the venues. So working with the venue programmers for them to illuminate the tour-ready work, I guess, that they had programmed, and then industry that accredit with us that they can go onto that web platform and watch either a trailer or a pitch or a full video version and get all the tour specs, so the industry specs, as opposed to marketing copy that you'd get on edfringe.com. So I think it's a really useful platform, and one that we can hopefully grow and develop and support other artists as well. So it might be alongside a live festival, but it might have emerging artists as well, or wild cards that again the venues kind of put forward as shows to watch or interesting artists. So it just creates, I guess, a bit of a business side to the Fringe as well as the audience engagement side. Yeah,
I love it. And sorry if you did mention this, but is that something that's still ongoing? Is that something that you can still kind of access and producers can see this?
Yeah, so that's live until June next year, and any program can accredit and have a look at the shows that are on there. So again, it was a way to try and support companies that did.
That's great.
Yeah.
And just so I can flash our cool banners, is this information something we can get from the Ed Fringe site?
You can, yes.
All right.
Yeah. And
here we go. Like magic.
Yeah.
It's a bit of technology magic. Edfringe.com. That's great. Check that out for Marketplace and other information in Fringe. And then Holly, for other fringes, I know you've got widespread fringes out there, or fringers are interested to hear more about World Fringe. There you go. Worldfringe.com. Do you have any meetings, anything scheduled for the immediate future?
Not immediate future, but there are lots of festivals happening, and there are a list of 300 festivals on there to peruse through, and you can look at them in date order, so you can find out what's happening.
That's great. And if, again, these festivals, and for artists, something you mentioned, Holly, just to bring it up, I know a lot of artists who are like, oh, I just did the Minnesota Fringe, and I did the Orlando Fringe, and then that Fringe picked me up at this Fringe, and they're like hopping from Fringe to Fringe around the world, like you said, never leaving their apartment. So this is a time. This is not a time for artists to feel like they need to be locked in.
No.
Like
if your work translates to digital, this is your moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And it's something that's going to probably be around. So it's okay to jump in late, even when doors open soon or whenever they open. You're going to have a platform there, and that the festivals have discovered this, the venues have discovered this, and we're going to look forward. Hello, Holly's son.
Come in. There he is.
There he is. He's like, no.
Forgot that you were there.
Well, we're about. I do have one late question I'm going to throw out there from Mr. Jonathan Tipton Myers. Has anybody addressed the economic pressure from RE prices that was squeezing Fringes pre-COVID?
What do you mean by RE prices?
Is you out there? Oh, okay. So while Jonathan gets that going, Erez to Holly, Peyton, Lombardo. How about starting those Tuesday meetings again?
I know,
all right.
I know. We're gonna do it. I promise. We miss you. We totally do miss you.
Erez has been great. And they've been doing great work too. I mean, talk about the positive attitude, working the online, trying to get that space open. Erez has been great. Oh, real estate. Thank you, Jonathan.
What was the call?
So going back, has anybody addressed the economic pressure from real estate prices that have been squeezing Fringes pre-COVID? I guess we kind of talked about how Amy kind of mentioned how Fringe was maybe getting too big, right? Which supply and demand may have like driven up prices. I imagine there's going to be some change with this now, right?
Yeah, and certainly, I don't know if Jonathan's been in direct real estate, but certainly accommodation in Edinburgh was becoming a challenge for people. It was just becoming so expensive, and demand and supply. So we're all hoping certainly that that's going to be normalised and become affordable. And we've been doing lots of work with partners to secure more affordable accommodation. But if demand is lower next year, hopefully supply is more generous and prices are more normalized.
Well, it's just another one of these underlying elements that we're learning about. We're seeing how this is affected. With all the bad, I think the takeaway is this is great for creativity. Be creative, be experimental. And this is a time to connect. This is a time for everyone to really reach out, thinking about tomorrow, learning from each other. So listen, we're at the top of the hour. I just want to thank both of you for not only joining us on the show, but really all you're doing to keep this energy and hope alive. It really is important that there are people like you out there keeping the fire stoked, keeping the house light on. So when we can open into each other's house, there'll be somebody there, and to really build that connection. Because I think, like George Floyd taught us too, this is a world things that we have to deal with. And we need to work as a world and connect. We can't be in our own little private corner of the world. So thank you for both of you for all you do with that. And I look forward to getting reports and hearing from it. And drinks on me next time, Edinburgh, Free Sisters, or one of the bars there. We'll find some place. We'll have a drink. We'll have a little gin and a little tonic. Yay! A little more comments. I'm going away from these digital options. I agree. They are awesome. And if you're enjoying all this, what's that?
Oh, I was just going to say, it's been lovely to be here with you, Matthew and Holly. And I agree that it's easy to get bogged down in the negative, but we need to be thinking longer term, and we just have to see this as a challenging time, but it's not the end of the world. We have to keep, moving forward.
Nope. And in fact, it could be hope for a new world. Like there's some good stuff coming out of this.
Yeah, definitely.
So, well, both of you guys enjoy your gin, Holly, and enjoy your evening, Amy.
I'm not drinking the whole bottle.
And everyone out there in the audience, thanks so much for joining us today. Tomorrow, I'm very excited to have Jessica Hanna and Greg Woolhead, a director and a writer, talking about how has that role changed? How are writers writing for this new medium? How are directors directing in this new medium? And I'm looking to talk, and actually, it's another international. We got somebody in US and somebody in Lisbon. So again, bringing the world together. Let's do it. All right. Well, thank you again, Amy, Holly. Big.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Stay
Bye-bye.
strong.
Bye now. All right, Miles, take us out. Bye.